I can't think of a more fitting speaker for our 40th anniversary than the original champion for Christ, our first graduate. Please welcome as our 2011 Baccalaureate speaker, Dr. Vernon Brewer.
Thank you, Chancellor Falwell, Pastor Falwell. Thank you, faculty, family, friends, and the class of 2011. Thank you for this opportunity to speak to you tonight. This is your time to bask in praise. You've earned it. You have succeeded in a demanding course of learning. Your life is now full of promise because of your significant accomplishments. And I want to congratulate your parents tonight. They've paid for your education. They have invested in your future. They've sacrificed from the very beginning. And I know their pride in your accomplishments is even greater than your own. And together with God, they have helped make you the success you are today and the success you will be tomorrow. Would you join me in saying thank you to your parents? And what a special occasion for Liberty University. 40 years of training champions for Christ. And I believe that I'm here this evening, at least in part, because I am the first graduate of Liberty University. And it was an honor that Elmer Towns constantly reminds me of that was bestowed on me because of my name in the alphabet, not because of any academic excellence. There were 14 of us. There were 14 of us. No one's name began with an A, mine began with the B, and the rest is history. So I'd like to begin tonight on this 40th celebration by remembering another 40th anniversary of celebration and remembrance, but not one of wisdom and learning. This was a celebration for bravery and courage. In 1984, President Ronald Reagan traveled to Normandy, France to mark the 40th anniversary of D-Day. That event is memorialized just a short distance from here this evening at the D-Day Memorial in Bedford. Reagan marked that event with these powerful words: "We stand on a lonely windset point on the northern shore of France. The air is soft, but 40 years ago at this moment, the air was dense with smoke and the cries of men, and the air was filled with the crack of a rifle fire and the roar of a cannon. At dawn, on the morning of the 6th of June, 1944, 225 Rangers jumped off the British landing craft and ran to the bottom of these cliffs. Their mission was one of the most difficult and daring of the invasion: to climb these sheer cliffs and to take out the enemy guns. The Rangers looked up and saw the enemy soldiers at the edge of the cliffs, shooting down at them with machine guns and throwing grenades. And the American Rangers began to climb. They shot rope ladders over the face of these cliffs and began to pull themselves up. And when one Ranger fell, another would take his place. When one rope was cut, a Ranger would grab another and begin his climb again. They climbed, shot back, held their footing, and soon one by one of the Rangers pulled themselves over the top. And in seizing the firm land at the top of these cliffs, they began to seize back the continent of Europe. 225 came here. After 2 days of fighting, only 90 could still bear arms. These are the boys of Pointe du Hoc. These are the men who took the cliffs. These are the champions who helped free a continent. And these are the heroes who helped end a war. All of life is about scaling cliffs. And I can promise that each one of you will be called upon to scale cliffs in your own lives. Some may be intimidating, some may appear insurmountable, but you can scale every one of them. I want to call your attention also tonight to another hero of mine who scaled a cliff, Jonathan, the son of Saul. In 1 Samuel chapter 14, Jonathan secretly enlisted the support of his armor bearer to engage the Philistines. And in this passage, Jonathan says to him, "Come then, we will cross over to the men and let them see us. If they say to us, 'Wait here until they come for you,' we will stay and not go up to them. But if they say, 'Come up to us,' we will climb up the cliffs, because that will be our sign that the Lord has given them into our hands." And you know the rest of the story. Not only did Jonathan and his armor bearer defeat the Philistines at the outpost, but God worked miraculously and the entire Philistine army was defeated. Jonathan and the rangers who took the cliffs of Normandy are relevant to us tonight. The lessons learned from their bravery are a challenge to all of us this evening, but especially to those of you who are just starting to scale life's cliffs. God worked miraculously through Jonathan and his armor bearer. I believe he worked miraculously that day in 1944 in Normandy. And since that day, when I walked across the stage to graduate from Liberty, I face my own cliffs. I have learned the lessons from the climb and watched as God has miraculously worked in my own life. One of those lessons that I've learned is that climbing alone without God or the support of others leads to failure. Don't climb the cliffs of life alone. Jonathan took his trusted friend. The character of his armor bearer, think about it, a nameless but committed servant, is summed up in his response: "Do all that you have in mind. Go ahead. I am with you heart and soul." And we know that the many men in the band of brothers who sacrificed their lives on that windswept day in Normandy. Moving with God means that you will never climb the cliffs alone. Some of you will take this advice to mean that you should find a spouse and scale life's cliff with them. God knows I would be nothing without the support from my wife and family. She tells me that every day. They have always climbed life's cliffs with me in the most difficult moments. While that is certainly true, you also need the support from others as well. Parents, grandparents, family, friends. I know that your graduate would want nothing more for you to be climbing the cliffs of life together with them. So this is the good news, that Jesus Christ, the sinless Son of God, was born of a virgin. He died a cruel death on the cross to pay the penalty of our sin. He was buried in a tomb, and on the third day, he rose victorious over death. And if you do not have a personal relationship with Jesus Christ, you could not give your graduate a better gift than to establish that relationship with Christ tonight. The principle of not climbing alone was never more true in my life than my battle with cancer I remember that Dr. Falwell, the founder of Liberty University, used to say, "Life is full of glorious opportunities, brilliantly disguised as insoluble problems." Jerry Falwell always believed that miracles happened every day. And I am one of those miracles. In 1985, I was diagnosed with a rapidly growing form of Hodgkin's disease, a rare malignant cancer affecting the lymphatic tissue in my body. I endured 18 surgeries, including one that removed a 5-pound tumor attached to my heart and lungs. I spent weeks at a time in the hospital, a year and a half of debilitating radiation and chemotherapy, and agonizing hours in physical therapy. Many of those days very near to falling off the cliff to my death. There were good days and bad days, lonely and dark days, and nearly every one of them was painful. Cancer left me with the scars of my battle and a weakened voice. But Jerry Falwell believed that God could work a miracle in me and convened a 24-hour day of prayer on my behalf. Every hour around the clock in the prayer chapel on campus, hundreds of students came to pray. And suddenly all of Liberty University and Thomas Road Church and Jerry Falwell and Elmer Towns and Ed Heinzen and Mark Hine and a host of others were climbing with me through prayer. I saw and felt the effects of those prayers. I soon became to believe that God was going to do an incredible thing in my life because of this trial. I believed God was going to heal me, and He did. I'm alive today because of the prayers of Liberty University students. And I believed He was going to use me in my struggles to change lives, and He has. Through our work with World Help, God has used us to bring spiritual and physical help to more than 7 million people around the world. And I've never forgotten all of the people who are with me in heart and soul. But it began with their prayers and their faith that opened my eyes to the work that God can do in my life and gave me the confidence to trust in Him and to rely on Him. God-sized challenges require a reliance on God. Self-sufficiency is not an option. Erwin McManus says, if everything else remains uncertain, be clear on this point. There is a calling on your life. There is a level of clarity you can have about what to do next. Serving others functions like a compass in the midst of a fog. Faith is not only about trusting the character of God, but also about transforming your character. And it does not matter in what career or context you find yourself, or whether or not you are certain about what you will find at the top of the cliff. Every follower of Jesus Christ has the prime directive of representing our Lord and Savior on this earth. It's not easy to preserve our ideals in the midst of difficult struggles, especially with those who despise every value we stand for. But the Bible's call to do just that reminds me of the saying about Christianity, that it has not been tried and found wanting, so much as it has been found difficult and not tried. Your calling demands that you try, no matter how difficult the climb. And we can ask of God for wisdom to light our path step by step in an unwavering confidence in His capacity. Wisdom is a virtue given by God. Sometimes All wisdom asks of us is that we recognize common sense. But sometimes wisdom, as do all other virtues, requires courage. That was true in my own life. When I knew God was calling me to another one of those challenging moments of cliff scaling, to plant 1,000 churches in India. It was March of 1996, on a trip to India with Liberty University students. I was no stranger to poverty or filth or spiritual darkness, but nothing in my travels prepared me for what I experienced on this trip to India. I was overwhelmed by the masses of people everywhere I looked. The poverty, the stench, and the hopelessness on their faces were an all-out assault on my senses. I wasn't sure why God had sent me to India, but He sure had my attention. The next morning, our small team drove about an hour out of town to a remote village of Karpina. I was told there wasn't another church within 50 miles in any direction. I met a young pastor, a Hindu convert, who had discipled 192 believers in only 14 months. They were meeting together under a tree. They didn't have a church building. That's why we were there. We dedicated a new church building provided by Liberty's campus church. And that young pastor told me, we have 1,000 pastors trained and ready right now to plant 1,000 new churches. All we need is some help. And I was wearing a baseball cap that said, World Help. It was then that I heard the still small voice of God say, Vernon, this is why I brought you to India. This is why I spared your life from cancer and gave you a new lease on life. This is why World Help was started. This is what I want you to do for the rest of your life. Plant churches where no churches exist. I quickly did the math in my mind. $4,000 to build one church building multiplied by 1,000 trained pastors, that's $4 million. And I prayed silently, God, I can't do this. It's too big. And once again, I heard the still small voice of God say, good, I can. God's vision for me was clear. 1,000 new churches, and to make sure I would follow through, I set a deadline to complete the vision by the year 2000. I returned home so excited when I told my family and friends of what I'd experienced and my vision to plant 1,000 new churches by the year 2000 and build 1,000 church buildings. Some of them laughed. John Maxwell once told me, Vernon, if you tell someone your vision and they don't laugh, it's not big enough. One by one, God brought people across my path to make the vision possible. I soon learned that when the vision is God's, He'll make it happen. Churches caught the vision. Friends and family members and people I didn't even know wanted to be part of something that was bigger than themselves. For several years, I cast this vision everywhere I went, and people caught it. But on December 31st, 1999, we were only one day away from our deadline and still 10 churches away from reaching our goal. I was at home when the phone rang. Someone I had never met called me to tell me he was mailing a check for $40,000 to plant 10 new churches. I looked at my watch. It was 1:27 in the afternoon. I remember saying, we did it with plenty of time to spare. I've always said that God is seldom early, but never late. This time he was early. But as I watched CNN bring in the new millennium around the world, I realized that with the unusual 10.5-hour time zone change, it was actually midnight in New Delhi. And then it hit me. God did it. He did it on India time. And since that first day in the desert, my first day in India, God's allowed us to build 1,400 of those church buildings just like that first one. And he's allowed us to help start 52,000 new churches in some of the most remote places in the world, resulting in 5 million new Christ followers. I've often thought, what would have happened on my first day in India if I'd have just walked away and said, I can't. The risk is too great. I can't scale this cliff, it's too high. One of our partners from India who has planted hundreds of those new churches is here tonight. He's graduating with the class of 2011. And his family has flown in all the way from India. I know how proud they are to be here for this special occasion. He's one of my heroes. He's probably sitting in the back. Benny Matthews, would you and your family from India please stand and let us say thank you to you. There he is. Since that experience in India, I've lived my life with this one thought in mind. Every day, I try to live my life in such a way that I accomplish at least one thing that will outlive me and last for eternity. And I challenge you, class of 2011, to do the same thing. This world is a dangerous place. Not just because of physical danger, but because of spiritual danger as well. Our enemy is big, but our God is bigger. What God expects from us is an unwavering trust and confidence that whatever cliff he asks us to scale, he will conquer whatever it is that waits for us at the top. Jonathan began climbing with no certainty concerning his well-being. He only knew that he was supposed to climb because he was moving with God. The challenges before many of you will be uncertain. My climb in India definitely was that way. But to climb with God is to accept a life of uncertainties without the guarantee of personal success, without the guarantee of absolute safety, to have our confidence in God, but you must begin the climb. If you want to change your world and scale the cliffs of your life, you have to do so with character, with faithfulness to Christian values, and with prayer. Jerry Falwell used to say so many times that nothing of eternal significance is ever accomplished apart from prayer. You are the first class that is graduating having come through Liberty University without having seen the institution's founder. Yet you see him all around you. It was his faith that believed that miracles like Liberty University still happen. And it was his confidence in God that he would complete the work. And in the words of his life's verse, I am certain that God, who began the good work in you, will continue his work until it is finally finished. And the same is true for you and for me. Tonight, the world looks full of promise to each one of you, and it is. You have finished your course here at Liberty, and you are on to unimaginable heights. But the question for you is about your climb in life. Will you climb into the unknown like Jonathan and the men at Normandy, even in the face of uncertainty? Or will you play it safe? And will you climb alone? Or will you climb with God? And will you do so with his wisdom and do so as a humble servant of a cause greater than yourself? McManus asked the question this way: in your moment of truth, what will you choose? Will you choose the wilderness or adventure? Have you confused the blessing of God with wealth, comfort, and security? Have you considered that his greatest blessing comes when he calls us to be pioneers, explorers, and even conquerors? Will you dare to live a life of adventure? When you do, you will live in the epicenter of God's activity. You know where to begin. Take initiative. Impact the world by fighting the battles that are on God's heart. So I say to you tonight, no matter what career you find yourself in, we're all called to do battle with the kingdom of darkness. We all in some way desire to change our world, to change it for Jesus Christ. 40 years ago, I sat on the first row of the first graduating class. Jerry Falwell challenged us to change the world. I accepted that challenge, and I dedicated my life to doing just that. Now, 40 years later, my prayer is that you graduates here tonight will go out and do the same. Can you imagine the impact you could make? The boys of Point du Hoc went out and scaled the cliffs and changed their world. Jonathan and his armor bearer scaled the cliffs and changed their world. 40 years from now, may you be remembered as the men and women of liberty who took the cliffs, as the champions of Christ who helped free a world from the bondage of suffering, as the heroes who served the cause of Christ selflessly. May it be said that you changed your world.